And welcome back to another Around the Bases with Bubba and Mo interview. Today we're going to talk some Minnesota Twins. And in order to do so, we're going to bring on Brandon Warne of The Athletic Minnesota and Zone Coverage Minnesota. You can find him at Brandon_Warne. Brandon, how we doing?
I'm good, guys. It's a little chilly and I'm getting ready for Thanksgiving, but I really can't complain. It's going real well here in Minneapolis.
Yeah, I was just up in Wisconsin this past week, and it is getting very chilly. So I feel you there. It's nice to be back in California where the sun comes out.
Oh my goodness, and it's 2 hours earlier too. So you got all your whole afternoon in front of you, whereas it's gonna be dark here in no time. It's like the land of the it's not the midnight sun, it's whatever the opposite of that is. The land of the noon moon, I guess. But it sucks,
Yeah.
you get home from work and there's no sunlight, and you get up and there's no sunlight, but we live here for some reason or another, and I can't complain too much.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome up there. I can't hate it. You are my Twins guy, my go-to Twins guy. So before we get into this offseason in 2018, I know when we talked before, it was kind of mixed feelings, like pretty good feelings on 2017 season. Now that it's all said and done, how would you grade this Twins in 2017?
I mean, I think probably a solid A minus. Obviously, I think it was overachieving in the respects of the way people had expected them to probably be closer to 500 or under. But honestly, other than the pitching staff being a little iffy with the bullpen and rotation, it still was a good season. And to play in that wild card game, to take a lead on the Yankees and then see the Yankees storm back and do what the Yankees do to the Twins was obviously not ideal. But the Twins, just like the Yankees, are in a good position moving forward. It's not a window closing. It's a window opening up, and a window opening up pretty quickly. So I think Twins fans have a lot to be excited about, in addition to these Minnesota Vikings.
Well, that's good about the Vikings too. They're doing really well. But you kind of said, the overachieving, and now the window is open. What changes specifically do you think they need to make to really open that window and compete for a division and compete for not only just the wild card, but maybe even further than that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the supplementing what's coming up through the farm system in the near future, which to me means they probably do need to have one more strong starting pitcher. They've got some interesting guys. They added Steven Gonsalves to the 40-man roster here before the deadline, and Fernando Romero now has been on for a year. So they've got some intriguing pitching prospects in the pipeline. But, they've got guys to lock down like the 3 through 5 spots or the 4 and 5 spot if you've got Berrios and Santana at 1 and 2. You need a solid 3. Yu Darvish would easily be your number 1, or someone like Alex Cobb who would slot into more of a number 2, number 3 role. You do need to go out and get one more guy. And I do think they're going to be players in that market, whether it's signing someone like Lance Lynn or trading for somebody, which I don't know what the market has, where Stroman would be available or anything like that. But I do think they need one more starter and probably another bullpen arm or 2. And then it's kind of fine-tuning the offense, whether it's a guy who can hit lefties or, if they really want to go big and sign a Carlos Santana to DH would be another move that's worth considering. But it's a good position to be in. They only got about 20 some odd million committed to the 2019 payroll, so they can be a little bit risk averse in terms of track if they wanted to do that. Their good players are all young and cheap. So now's the time, whether it's this offseason or next offseason, to really supplement wherever they see a need.
You mentioned the farm system. What is who I should say are some of the guys that are going to be available, potentially making impacts in 18?
Probably, yeah, Steven Gonsalves, pretty good lefty, kind of has the classic lefty profile, pretty good breaking ball and fastball, 90-92, just polished. And it's kind of amazing. He and Cole Stewart were drafted in the same draft. Cole Stewart was left off the 40-man roster and Gonsalves was added. So Stewart went 4th overall and Gonsalves was in like the 2nd or 3rd round. I can't remember exactly, but he was supposed to be a higher pick that had some off-field issues that were actually nothing too serious. And anyway, so he's really pitched himself into the team's plans. Fernando Romero has a really live arm, throws in the mid-90s, good secondary stuff, but is, obviously working on polish a little bit. Nick Birdie, Jake Reed, both left off the 40-man roster. They've kind of fallen back. It's going to be more about guys like John Curtis, who made a brief, trip into the big leagues last year, but good fastball especially. He throws really hard. And, offensively, there's not much in the way of prospects. Nick Gordon might be a year away yet, but he's kind of their most polished offensive prospect. And then Mitch Garver, who spent time in the big leagues last year but didn't do a whole lot. Right now, it looks like he's going to be their backup catcher and platoon guy with Jason Castro. Really turned himself into a good defensive catcher who's probably got more room to improve there. But for a guy who is always considered to be bat first, he's pretty well-rounded, and he can give you some things that Castro can't in terms of against left-handed pitching. So, yeah, again, you look at this roster in terms of youth. They've got some guys who can round out a roster and really finish a 25-man, but you're not looking at a Byron Buxton level talent on this farm system unless you go all the way down to like Royce Lewis, who they took number 1 overall. And even if he missed him, he's still got a ways to go to make it to the big league. So it's going to be more supplementary guys and complementary guys for the near term.
One guy we've talked about before, and Mo and I have talked about him quite a bit with Prospect Talk. What's the status on like Nick Gordon coming through the system?
Well, the latest I've heard is he looks better at second base than short. Obviously, a very polished approach at the plate for the most part. And he's got the big league body. I think it's part of its, the genes that he's got as far as being Tom Gordon's son, Dee Gordon's brother. So he's got a lot of the big league mentality in terms of preparation, in terms of all that. And he's been able to lean on those guys quite a bit in his family to know where he needs to get to. But he doesn't necessarily look like a star, but rather a really nice everyday player. Steal a few bases, and can play steady defense at second base. I don't know if he'll stick it short. What I'm hearing right now is that Polanco is the better shortstop, the guy that's in the big leagues right now. But either or, it's obviously a middle infield that would be pretty solid. Right now, Brian Dozier is heading into his walk year, and so they'll have to decide go. And who knows, maybe someday it'll be Miguel Sano at first base, Brian Dozier at third base, and then Gordon and Polanco up the middle. It's still kind of up in the air with Joe Mauer on his last year of his mega contract that he signed back before the Twins moved to Target Field.
Yeah, on to this offseason. I mean, obviously this is sort of the calm before the storm offseason with, everyone who's a free agent in 2019. In terms of offensive targets, you mentioned Carlos Santana. It doesn't seem like they need, a ton of upgrades, and they probably don't want to spend the money at offense with their pitching needs. But other than Carlos Santana, do you see them going after, any of the maybe free agent possible first base DH platoon guys?
Yeah, I mean, I thought, JD Martinez makes sense for every offense, but at the price point that he's likely to get with
right.
Boris, taking calls for him is probably not going to be that likely. The Twins are not afraid of Boris. Royce Lewis is a Scott Boras client. I actually got to meet when he signed. So that was actually kind of a fun bucket list thing to meet Scott Boras, but not that intimidating of a guy in person, if we're being completely honest, which is kind of surprising. But he says things and he gets his guys paid, and that's all you can ask for as an agent. So the one guy, though, that I think people are sleeping on that I'm really excited about is Logan Morrison. And I'll tell you why. No qualifying offer, which means that the team that signs him is not going to have to give up anything in terms of losing a draft pick. 38 home runs last year. There's a very clear change in his approach. 25% strikeout rate was up, walk rate was up, and he got rid of the ground balls. He said, you know what, we're going to put the ball in the air and we're going to ride or die with it. I don't know, man. I think, he's 30 years old. I think he's going to be a very nice guy that signs, 3 years, $30 million, 3 years, $36 million. You're looking at a Kendry Morales kind of deal for a guy who's still on the upswing, and I'm taking a shot like that if I'm the Twins. Knowing that I need a first base / DH for after Mauer leaves. Brent Rooker will be in that mix as well, but you need to fill both those spots. And I think Morrison is going to be a guy whose talents are undervalued. There's a non-zero chance he could outperform Eric Hosmer moving forward. Now, I don't think that's super likely, but Hosmer's a guy that hits the ball on the ground, and he's a lot more flash than he is substance defensively. Sometimes you got to play the market ends you. And if I'm the Twins, I'm looking at Santana, who is the safest bat on the market, in my opinion, is going to be my first target. But honestly, Morrison is not a bad fallback option at all.
Yeah, very interesting. I agree on the Hosmer part of it. In terms of the pitching targets, you mentioned Yu Darvish before. Jake Arrieta is out there. And then the other two guys, Lance Lynn and Alex Cobb. I guess we've heard all the targets. I guess we'll get your opinion here. Who would you go after? Maybe not as a number one, but in terms of the Twins and their payroll restrictions.
Well, I think when you consider everything involved, Lance Lynn is probably the guy. Cobb is obviously a nice pitcher, good changeup, which is something that the Rays preach, and will probably get the cheapest deal of them. But for me, Lynn, a guy coming off second year, Tommy John, on the upswing. The home run problem was kind of an isolated issue in the first half last year. And I just think Lynn is the kind of guy who could get a Rick Porcello contract, but justify it, fulfill it. And he's hilarious in the clubhouse. His interviews on YouTube are just hysterical. He just seems like the kind of guy that could really tie a rotation together. And honestly, if you go into a postseason series with Irvin Santana, Lance Lynn, and Jose Berrios, I think you can come out a winner. You got to add 2 relievers if you do that. And I just think Lynn, though, he's hitting free agency at a weird time. He came off a little bit of a down year. If you look at his FIP, strikeouts cratered a bit in the second half, which is not uncommon for Tommy John guys. I just think this is a guy who he's not a number 1, 2 to 3.4 ERA year in and year out. Strikeout per inning are right around there. For the most part, can keep the ball in the park. That's an underrated skill set. It's not a guy getting a ton of grounders and a ton of strikeouts, but you're not going to pay that price either. So I think he's the guy to go after who, outside of that Tommy John surgery, was durable. Never made 30 starts, never thrown 180 innings. That scares me.
Yeah, that's definitely something to think about. Let's talk about some of the players from last season that gave you guys that big improvement from the year before. And one of them's a name many mentioned in Byron Buxton, who had another big second half of this season, similar, probably better than 2016. What should we expect going forward? Many think that he's actually found it now.
He's a superstar. He really is. If he hits like he did after, he's like a BJ Upton. If it's second half, he's more, I don't know who I would compare him to. But after April, I think he's like a 750 OPS kind of guy, which 750 OPS, stealing 20 bases without being caught. The only time he was caught all year is when he overslid the bag. He's like 30 bases kind of guy. You're looking at a stud, like young BJ Upton, and the value is less obvious because you don't see a guy that's hitting 300 with 40 bombs. But the defense is just that good. He can turn a single into a double, stealing bases. So if the hitting is for real for the second half, though, you're talking about one of the 5 or so best players in the game. And I don't know, that's more 850 OPS, which I don't know if we've really seen a guy like that. Because even when Mike Trout has been as great as he's been, the bat is obviously great. The glove is obviously great. He steals bases, he hits home runs. I think of like if you took Lorenzo Cain and Torrey Hunter and mashed them together early in Hunter's career for bat and early in his career for his glove and late for his bat and then just kind of the finer points there. I'm actually kind of in my fantasy league. I have him in Ottoneu, which is the Fangraphs league. I got him for $15, and I'm thinking to myself, I probably got to keep him at that. I can't cut him and try to get him back cheaper because I think the secret's out that he's kind of figured it out. He's going to still struggle with sliders away, off-speed stuff deep into counts. But, man, the tools, the wiry strength, the speed, still can bunt for a hit if he needs to. He's the total package, and I just think it's going to be interesting to see how it all comes together over a full season if he doesn't have a completely lost April.
I wonder if and I'm just kind of looking, I was trying to think of comps, like you said, obviously the BJ Upton comp after April, but in terms of the second half, I mean, it could be a Carl Crawford comp from 2010 in his contract year. He had an unbelievable year, 300, 360 OBP, 850 OPS, like you said, with, 19 homers, 47 stolen bases. So it could be that.
But then I think Crawford was a left fielder at that point, right?
Yeah. Well, offensively, but defensively, obviously, he's got all the tools. He had the tools even before the second half.
Well, I think that's what makes it even more amazing is it's Crawford's offense and then Kevin Kiermaier's defense. I mean, Kiermaier's a great player because of his defense. You add those two together, and it's a special player. And that's before you even feel like he's scratching the surface of the potential that people had thought he had. I mean, even if he's been graded down a tick, he's just still a fun player to watch every day, even when he makes mistakes, because he can outrun his mistakes defensively and on the bases and quiet guy. I mean, he's just a really enjoyable person to be around in that clubhouse.
Yeah, completely agree. So let's move on to Dozier. Obviously, they tried to trade him last year, when the Dodgers were looking for a second baseman. The Dodgers ended up going to Forsythe because I think the Twins were asking for Bellinger, which was the
Mm-hmm.
right move. And if
Yeah.
they had made that trade, obviously it would have been a home run. But they ended up keeping Dozier. He started slow, ended real fast. Do you think there's a possibility that they do go after him with Mauer's money coming off the books, or did they just go the Nick Gordon route?
I don't know, because honestly, you know, people have asked me, will they trade him again if there's a good offer? And to me, it's like the market hasn't changed. Brian Dozier isn't a new player, and now he's got one less year of control. So for me, I think you have to start thinking about that extension of, you know, a guy that's turning, actually he is 30 now, you know, going into his age 31 season. Now it is time to think about, is a 3-year deal at $60 million the right move or something like that? Because he did give away some of his prime years at a pretty good price, and I don't think he's going to want to do that again. And this is a guy who was a senior sign, so he didn't make any money in terms of a draft bonus. So everything he's making now is house money in terms of the fact that he probably didn't think he was going to be a big league star, at least not from a forecast standpoint. But yeah, you have to think about position. You have to think about, you know, if he stops pulling the ball as much with power, is he a much less, you know, solid player? And the other thing too is Ian Kinsler's on the trade market this year. You got Neil Walker as a free agent. So even if the Twins were listening to offers without publicly making it known, there's some pretty decent players available for teams that are looking to make moves. So you really do have to start assessing, you know, do you sign them to a 3-year deal, or do you sign them to a deal where you tear up this year, feel goodwill to kind of clean up the back end, you know, where maybe you sign them through age 33 instead of 34 or 35. So it's going to be interesting because they really got to get some of these kids eventually as well. Probably not this year, but maybe next year.
So you mentioned the need for pitching. Everyone knows the Twins need to fill out that rotation. They had Irvin Santana pitch extremely well this past year, and you had Jose Berrios, your 1 and your 2, who had a kind of rocky up and down season, but showed big improvements overall. What should we expect out of those two going into 18?
I mean, with Santana, it's tough because every slider he throws is another slider he's throwing as he gets to age 35, which is coming up fast. It's a guy that's never really had arm issues. He's a physical freak. He works out hard. All the guys just rave about his preparation in that clubhouse. And so it's hard to say, honestly, because, you know, you look at his FIP, you look at his strikeout rate, his ground ball rate, his strand rate, and all that stuff doesn't really support an ERA where it was this year. But I think he gets, you know, weak fly ball contact, which in this year's environment is crazy with how many home runs were hit. I don't know. I don't think you can count on him as a 1 moving forward. But if he gives you a 3.80 or 4.00 ERA, that's still an asset at his price point, which is about $14 million per year. You know, that doesn't buy you much in free agency. Berrios, I think, will take a big jump forward and kind of pick up the slack. And that's though why if you're back to where you started, even if those guys flip-flop, you still need to have a better rotation. You know, Kyle Gibson was good down the stretch, but not a 3, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, definitely. And now I got 2 questions here, and we'll kind of get not funny, I guess, but I mean, they signed Bartolo Colon in the middle of the year. So what was it like for him to join the team? And then second, I think I know the answer, but any desire to bring him back?
He was unique because he's just kind of like a unicorn. Like, you just don't believe he exists until he's in front of your eyes. And like, he's just walking around in like a tank top, and you see this crazy tattoo he's got on his arm of like I don't even remember what it was. He just, everything about him just seems larger than life. The hair is like this crazy fro and happy. He just floats around talking to guys. I don't know. It's just, I couldn't, if you asked me to put him into 1 word or 5 words, I couldn't do it. He's just, you know, he didn't have the greatest numbers, but he kept the Twins in games that they needed to win. Now, with that said, yeah, no interest in bringing him back. Personally, I just think, you know, they went out and got him because of the need in the moment. It's very rare that a pitcher of his status or stature, at least in terms of what he's accomplished in the game, becomes available at that time of year. But they really do have to aim higher. I mean, if it comes down to the end of the winter and he's still unsigned, I'd sign him to a minor league deal, but I just don't think there's any reason to prioritize bringing him back as he looks to, you know, he's turning 45 here before too long.
All right, I'll ask you one more question, and we'll send you on your way. I know it's a long off season to go, many moves to make. But if you had to project, where do you think the Twins head in 18? Are they improving? Are they staying around the same? just based on the improvements they made this last year?
I think they're going to get better. I think you're looking at with a move or two, a 92 to 94 win team next year. And before people get real crazy, I didn't think this team was going to be good in 2016. I thought, the 2015 team was about a 78 win true talent, and I thought they took a step back. So I said this last year's team would win 80 games, and I got, all these mocking tones, and I ended up being off by 5 in the minus sense. So I think this is a team on the upswing. They have so much going for them, whether it's really been able to extract talent from young players. They've focused on more of the fundamental things as far as, making the plays and then knowing what to do afterwards. And I just think that it's a team on the upswing, and that some of these young players are going to even get better. Your Max Keplers, your Byron Buxtons, your Jorge Polanco. Jorge Polanco's will turn in more complete seasons, which is obviously a very exciting time to be a Twins fan if that's what you're watching.
Yeah, definitely. A lot to like there, and good young bunch of people. So it'll be fun to see what they do in the offseason. And heck, Paul Mahler got manager of the year, for crying out loud. Some good things happening in Minnesota.
Oh, yeah.
Brandon, again, thanks for joining us. You can find Brandon on Twitter at Brandon_Warne. It's WARNE. His work's at the Athletic Minnesota, Zone Coverage Minnesota. He's always podcasting, videos, periscoping. He's doing something almost all the time regarding the Minnesota Twins. So go check it out. But Brandon, thanks for joining us.
You got it.
Okay. Catch you later.